And welcome to another episode of South Texas Now. This is attorney and nurse practitioner Joe Flores inviting you to join us each and every week right here in Corpus Christi and around the world. Bienvenidos a todos mis amigos que hablan nuestro idioma español. Bienvenido a mes amis qui parlent le français aussi. Y bem-vindo, mis amigos que falam português também. Because we load this up to South America, we load this up to Europe. The world is getting smaller as we know it, and they're very interested in our legal system. They're very interested particularly in how the court system works. But today, we're going to be talking about the life story of an amazing man that is a Renaissance man. Not only has he served since he was a young man, but today, not so young, but still young at heart, he is serving our community. But he has actually defended our country. He's defended the youth. He's defended the elderly and the downtrodden. But today I want to focus in on him, behind the robe, behind the courtroom. In his chambers, we are honored to interview Judge Joe Benavides. Welcome, Judge.
Thank you so much, Mr. Flores. It's a great pleasure being here, and I'm talking to you about my growing up here in Corpus Christi, Texas. Born in Chicago, Illinois, but definitely raised here in Corpus Christi. And thank you so much.
Well, Your Honor, you and I have known each other for a couple of decades, since we were both 5 years old. Okay, all right, that's a joke, But we've known each other, and I've seen your rise, but not really in power or influence, but more in your ability to serve. We started out talking about you living here in Corpus Christi. Let's really, really delve into that. What part of Corpus Christi did you grow up?
I grew up, Joe, in the western parts of the Oasis, in the areas of Baldwin and Port, and it was a struggle, but a good struggle. I'm a very humble man, and believe that there's many people out there. And this is the only reason I ran for office, was the fact there's a lot of people out in my neighborhood that wanted to speak up but could not, and they needed someone that could at least be in a certain position that would at least listen to these individuals that are out there, concerned citizens.
And we'll get to that in the second part of the show, but I want your biography. I want to hear about what motivates a man to go serve his country, and when he comes out, work in Washington, when he comes out, come back home and be on the bench. So let's start out with your childhood. You generally said, yeah, it was tough coming up and stuff, and a little, that's what I heard you say. But clarify and let us know, please, Judge. I think the people want to know about the struggles. Let's go. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and let's see how that goes. Going to school, where did you go to elementary school?
I attended, first and foremost, I attended Roshaw Elementary School because we did not have a home in Corpus Christi. My dad was in the Air Force. He retired, and we ended up in Corpus Christi. We stayed with my grandma on Lockheed, so that was the school that was there was Roshaw Elementary School. And then from there, my dad obtained a home on Cleo Street, and I attended T.G. Allen, and ate, in our family at a two-bedroom house on Cleo Street. So very humble, but lived as a lot of people struggled as a kid. But I found things out there when I was a kid, and that was like some way to earn money. And what I did was I picked up Coke bottles that were, refunded for 5 cents a bottle. So I used to do that. I used to pick up aluminum cans. But number one thing, and I thought was about myself, was that I never gave up on education, knowing that I could not keep up with my peers in school. And but the school gave me resources that I eventually graduated from high school.
You had some barriers. One of them being surviving every day off camera before we started. there was a lot of violence, and there were predators on the street. It's like living in a jungle.
Yes.
And how did you survive?
Well, the thing was that I knew there was so-called your small gangs within the neighborhoods, but I stayed away from the drugs that would peer pressure us. Kids out there, gangs would try to peer pressure you into drugs. But I would turn my back around and run away from these groups. Not only that, you had, back then it was sniffing paint, or more like...
inhalants of all types.
Yes. And I stayed away from that. I stayed away from drugs, period. And but there was a lot of bad happening back then. But what was good was I was a fast runner, so I would always turn around and run away from these individuals. And that's what made me much stronger, not as a runner, but street smart, knowing who not to hang around with and who to stay away from.
What sort of tragedies did you see growing up as a youth in that neighborhood on Clio?
There was a lot of suicidal attempts. There was kids beating each other up. It wasn't the type where you had a weapon, and there was knives out there, but mainly it was just beatings of young kids that would not do what other kids that were not doing right to follow through. So I just stayed away from all this negativity. And if there was negative that came upon me, I made it into a positive and walked away. And that's the way I dealt with all that.
What about your dad and mom? I mean, do you think that's how you stayed out of the gangs, other than personal choice and survival? What were their roles, and how did they impact you as a kid?
My mom and dad was very instrumental in me understanding why I should stay in school, stay away from the negativity, stay away from the drugs, stay away from the gangs. And it was a rough neighborhood, but I made definitely sure I did what my mom and dad said. And it was always something that was stressed by my dad and my mom, that you would always say yes sir, no sir. You would open up the doors for your seniors. It didn't matter where they came from, just have respect for our elderlies.
Now we're talking about your 1960s, 70s, growing up, coming up. How has that changed? Has anything changed or improved on the West Side?
Some have, but some not, because now we have social media, we have cell phones. I think that's the major problem we have nowadays with our kids. I understood as a young kid that the only way that you're going to get money in your pocket, you're going to have to work and do it the right way, and that's what I did. I mowed lawns. I picked up Coke bottles and refunded those Coke bottles. I would, at one time I worked at Garcia's Banana Company, unloading as a young kid, 10, 11 years old, unloading 60-pound boxes of bananas just for $25, and then to find out that he would not pay the $25 because the owner told me that it was a child labor laws, and he would always give me a box of bananas for my unloading the bananas from the 18-wheelers. But I converted that to a positive, and I sold those bananas to the seniors that made banana bread. So I was very blessed on that. And then my first real job was putting up the American flag and Texas flag for Nueces Bank. So early in the morning before going to school, I would put up those flags, and when I came back from school, I would take them down. So that was one of my first real jobs. But I always had something to do to make money because we lived in a lower social economic background. So, kids had to work, mow lawns, do what you had to get money. And most of it I gave to my parents, to my mom, the money that I made, but I kept some just to buy me a bag. Back then in the late 60s and 70s, they would sell you candy in a little brown bag, and that's what I would do. Just put in a nickel, 10 cents, and get a bag of candies.
Things in life, aren't clean or perfect. At the end of the day, if you've survived in a barrio or a neighborhood like that, you've made it. The kids nowadays with social media that you pointed out, there is no safe harbor. There have been some laws passed, and I wanted to underline that to our audience, that there are cyberbullying laws on the books now that the prosecutors are learning about, but not not quick enough. They're not prosecuting, I think. It's led to suicide. It's led to depression. And the kids never get a break from it. The bullying never stops. It can be 24 hours a day. Whereas if we were bullied, we at least had a fortress that was our humble home to come home to. So let's go back to that childhood. And as you were coming up, junior high, high school, what did you want to do with your life? Did you know back then that you were going to become a Marine?
Well, Mr. Flores, it was rough back in those days when I was a kid. We're talking about the late 60s, early 70s, and late 70s. I was considered a special resources student throughout the CCISD while I went to school. And but I never wanted to give up because I knew that was a lot of knowledge. But I was just not capable or had good study habits. And I think that's why I did not keep up with my peers in school. But I never gave up. And the bottom line, in my growing up as a young child, I saw a lot of harm done to young kids and kids that don't have no direction. We didn't have mentors back then, so you had to really look upon your father or your mother for guidance. And my mom was the one that really was an angel to me, that always told me never to give up. She knew my issues, but she didn't. She was like soft-spoken, but always told me never ever to give up. And I would always keep those pair of shoes she would buy from H-E-B and keep them under my bed for the next school season. So it wasn't as if all kids out there played barefooted. We shorts. We didn't have a lot of clothes. We didn't have things that kids have nowadays. But I appreciate what I've gone through because it just made me stronger to achieve where I'm at right now. I've been bullied as a young kid. I joined the Marines because I thought, I need a something or an organization or someone to teach me how to defend myself. And that's the only reason I joined the Marine Corps, was to defend myself, to learn how to defend myself, and also to get an education, even knowing that I had obstacles to go through. But I still thought the Marine Corps is not only going to provide me a way to defend myself, but also get educated. And not only that, I had a chance to see the world.
And you accomplished that.
Yes, I did.
Even though at the risk of your life and, of course, now as a disabled veteran, but you get up every morning, you brush your teeth, you shave, and you come in, you sit on the bench. But we want to break down that service. We've got about a minute and a half before we go to break, but I think this is important because it identifies with many veterans. Nothing is ever discussed anymore about veterans. People just they have Afghan fatigue. They've got Iraqi fatigue. They don't want to hear about the wars anymore. And so who suffers? The veteran. I want to talk about what's available for veterans, what you've seen, what you've personally helped with. And we're going to take a brief break, Judge. But if it's okay with you, I don't want to talk about anything that requires classified clearance or anything, but we've got a few seconds left. What I want to do is talk about your work with veterans, your experience as a veteran, and then we'll delve into your work in public service in the civilian world. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
We're going to be right back. You're talking to, and we're interviewing Judge Joe Benavides in his chambers. And I want you guys to stay tuned when we come back.